The tonal model. In Western common practice music, the tonic is the center of the tonal system, and other functions fall in a hierarchy around it. The tonic and dominant are commonly referred to as the pillars of tonality. Common practice music tends to alternate back and forth between tonic and dominant. This is true even if the key changes. The dominant as a function not only includes 5 and 5/7, but also includes other chords that have both the leading tone and scale degree 4. Six and 3 may be tonic-like because they both share 2 common tones with the tonic. They are often just slightly removed from the tonic. As music alternates between tonic and dominant, the dominant may optionally be preceded by a predominant chord. Predominants include 4, 2, and other predominants such as the Neapolitan and augmented 6 chords. Stephen Lates, in his book, The Complete Musician, describes this phenomenon as it relates to phrases as the phrase model. A typical phrase would go tonic to dominant, ending in a half cadence, or tonic to tonic, ending in an authentic cadence. In this Mozart example, both of the dominants are preceded by predominants. But at the beginning of the first phrase, we can see that the music goes tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic before the cadence. Lates calls this an expanded phrase model. The 6th chord is part of the tonic area because it is just slightly removed from the tonic because it has 2 common tones with it. Then the music goes dominant, tonic again, which makes another expanded phrase model. Finally, the non-expanded phrase model is the motion that takes the music to the cadence. Although not part of Lates' nomenclature, I like to put the expanded phrase models in brackets to distinguish them from the phrase model. Each new line starts at the initial tonic and then continues where the previous line left off. The second phrase begins like the first, but only has one expanded phrase model. The phrase model after it takes the music all the way to the cadence. I have devised a system of spirals to capture the cyclical nature of the phrase model. It has the tonic at the top and the dominant at the bottom. They represent the pillars of tonality being placed at polar opposites. The predominant is placed about 1/3 of the way around the spiral from the top, indicating that it is on its way to the dominant. Also, I call these spirals tonal models instead of phrase models because the tonic, predominant, dominant tonic motion happens with structures both smaller and larger than phrases. That makes this guy a tonal model. With the first phrase of the Mozart example, the first expanded tonal model goes once around the spiral. Because 6 is just slightly removed from 1, it is placed between the tonic and the predominant positions. The second expanded tonal model goes around the spiral again. Finally, the tonal model at the phrase level goes halfway around the spiral, ending on the dominant, corresponding to the half cadence. With the second phrase, the expanded tonal model goes once around the spiral, just like the first phrase. Then, the tonal model at the phrase level goes around the spiral again, ending on the tonic, corresponding to the authentic cadence. I think these spirals are powerful in that they visually represent what happens with tonal motion. I have had success using them to teach students how to make good choices when harmonizing melodies and making chord progressions. They can also assist in understanding how to interpret music. In this Mozart example, we should put emphasis on the dominants at the bottom of the spirals and release the emphasis as they resolve to the tonics at the top of the spirals. The most emphasis should go to the final dominants on the outsides of the spirals because that is where the most important tonal motion in each phrase happens, because that is where the cadences are. The final authentic cadence is the only place in the two phrases where there is root position 5-7 to 1. So this dominant to tonic motion is the most important one in the whole excerpt. The emphasis in the rest of the dominant to tonic resolutions is mitigated because one or both of the chords are inverted. The next example goes 1, 6, 5, 1, with the 6 and 5 being tonicized. Seven fully diminished 7 of 6 to 6 is essentially 7 fully diminished 7 to 1 in B minor. Seven fully diminished 7 of 5 to 5 is essentially 7 fully diminished 7 to 1 in A major. We can show this by making 6 have its own spiral and by making 5 have its own spiral. These 2 small spirals show the tonic to dominant motion in the tonicized areas, but the large spiral captures the tonal motion of the whole phrase. This next example shows how these spirals can be used in modulation. Each key requires a spiral. First, in the key of F, it goes tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic. The 1 chord is the diatonic pivot chord. It is the tonic looking back in the key of F and simultaneously predominant looking forward in the key of C. When a chord or tone has multiple functions, whether it be simultaneous, as it is here, or in 2 different places, I call it polysemy. Polysemy is a term borrowed from linguistics, which means multiple possible meanings of a word or phrase. The tonal model continues in the key of C. The line between the 2 spirals shows how they connect. Since 1 and 4 are the same chord, I write the pivot symbol over the line. Motion from dominant to tonic is typical in common practice music. While motion from predominant to tonic is atypical. This is visually shown in the spirals in that the tonic and dominant are at polar opposites, while predominant is not opposite tonic. Dominant to tonic sounds abrupt, while predominant to tonic sounds subtle. The abrupt nature of the former is perhaps why it might have become the basis for Western common practice music. 1 and 5/7 completely define the diatonic collection. 5/7 may deceptively resolve to 6 and less commonly 4/6. When this happens, I put the deceived resolution at the top of the spiral in the tonic location because it is taking the place of the expected tonic. This next example by Rachmaninoff contains a deceptive resolution and a predominant to tonic plagal cadence. First, there is an expanded tonal model around the spiral. Then the predominant is tonicized. Then the dominant resolves deceptively. Finally, the phrase ends with a plagal cadence. Although I have found these spirals to be quite valuable in my teaching, they don't work in all cases. For example, linear patterns, such as sequences and equal divisions of the octave, don't follow the tonal model. So I place the chords in them outside the circles, such as shown in the sequence here. At the end of the sequence, the music returns to following the tonal model and goes back into the spiral. I am presently exploring how the tonal spirals might be applicable to making connections between foreground, middle ground, and background structures.